"There's not much to tell, sir." "How are you and the coachman coming on?" "We'll not be very intimate after to-night, I'm thinking." "How is that?" questioned the attorney, at the same time smiling broadly at his companions. "Well, sir, there'll be no call for it. For one thing, as I've got all the points in this case I wanted, and for another, his chief returned this evening, and from the few words I overheard upon his arrival, I don't think the coachman will feel over confidential the next time he sees me," and McCabe smiled grimly to himself. "So Merrick is back," interposed Mr. Sutherland, laughing. "Did you and he meet?" "Meet, sir? Ah, no, not much of that. I heard a step coming up the stairs, and as I thought the room was hardly big enough for three, I excused myself to Mr. Jim Matheson, alias Matthews the coachman, and made for the hall. We passed each other at the head of the stairs, and I cluttered down, making as much racket as I could. Then, at the foot of the stairs, I took off my boots and crept upstairs again, more to hear the fellow's voice than anything else, so I could recognize him afterwards." "What did you hear?" inquired Mr. Barton, as McCabe paused to light a cigar which Mr. Sutherland had handed him. "I heard him say, 'Who was that I passed outside, Jim?' 'Only a cross-country friend of mine,' says Jim. 'What friends are you entertaining here in these quarters?' says he, kind of sharp-like. And sure, says Jim, it was only Dan McCoy, the clerk of that big London lawyer who has come over with the young Mr. Mainwaring I've heard you speak of, and a right clever fellow he is, too.' 'Clerk!' he roars out. 'Clerk, you blithering idiot! He's no more clerk than you are coachman, nor half so much, for you're fit for nothing but to take care of horses all your days. Do you want to know,' says he, 'who you've been entertaining? That's no more nor less than Dan McCabe, a Scotland Yard man they've brought over, nobody knows what for, but whatever his game, he's made you play into his hand.' I didn't stay to hear more," McCabe concluded. "I got out." "But how does this Merrick know you?" Mr. Barton inquired, as the laughter caused by McCabe's recital subsided. "He doesn't know me, he only knows of me," the man replied. "I found that out an hour or two later when I met him in a crowd at the Wellington Hotel." The speaker glanced curiously in the direction of Harold Mainwaring for an instant, and then continued. "I knew him by his voice, but I spoke with him, and he had no idea who I was." "But how has he heard of you?" persisted Mr. Barton. "There was an American detective, a friend of his, who came over on the Campania on the same trip with Mr. Mainwaring. He was following up a case in London, but he managed to keep his eye on Mr. Mainwaring and keep this Merrick posted of all that he was doing. It was because of some remarks of his that I got wind of that I determined from the first to get onto his game." "Well, Mac," said Mr. Barton tentatively, "are you ready to go to work now?" The keen eyes flashed for an instant in the attorney's face. Then the man answered quietly, "If you've nothing to tell me, I'm ready to go to work on my own hook and in my own way. If you've anything to say, I'll hear it." Mr. Barton glanced at the others. "We had better tell McCabe what we have learned, and also just what our plans are." The others bowed in assent, and the chairs were drawn closer together while Mr. Barton, in low tones, told, as briefly and clearly as possible, the discovery which they had made. McCabe listened to the attorney's story, but whether or not the secret were already guessed by him, his face gave no sign. When it was ended, he glanced curiously at Harold Mainwaring. "Mrs. LaGrange told you this?" "She did." "At what time, if you please, sir?" "At about 5:30. "Are you aware, sir, that with the exception of her maid, you were probably the last person who saw Mrs. LaGrange living?" "Saw her living?" Harold Mainwaring repeated, astonished, while Mr. Barton demanded, "What do you mean, Mac?" "I mean, sir," said McCabe slowly, "that Mrs. LaGrange committed suicide at about 7 o'clock this evening, less than 2 hours after Mr. Mainwaring saw her." "When did you learn of this? What do you know of the affair?" questioned the attorneys quickly, while Harold Mainwaring, more deeply shocked than he would have thought possible, listened to the man's reply. "I happened along by the Wellington about 2 hours ago, and saw considerable stir around there. I learned 'twas a case of suicide, but thought nothing of it till I heard the woman's name. Then I dropped in and picked up the facts in the case," and he proceeded to relate the details of the affair. As Harold Mainwaring listened, he recalled the looks and words of the wretched woman, her genuine misery, her falsehood and deceit, her piteous pleadings, and the final rage and scorn with which she had rejected his assistance, even in the face of such desperation and despair, and a sickening sense of horror stole over him, rendering him almost oblivious to the conversation around him. "'Twas there I saw this man Merrick," McCabe was saying in conclusion. "I heard him questioning the maid about Mr. Mainwaring's interview with the woman. He evidently was on to that. I saw the girl myself shortly afterwards, and gave her a hint and a bit of money to keep her mouth shut about Mr. Mainwaring. She seemed pretty bright, and I think she will understand her business." "Confound that meddlesome Yankee! What was he prowling around there for?" interrupted Mr. Scott angrily. "He has no business prying into Howard Scott Mainwaring's affairs, and I'll have him understand it. Let him attend to his own duties, and I think, from all reports, he will have his hands more than full then. Mr. Sutherland," he continued, addressing the attorney, "there's no knowing what that beastly bungler who calls himself a detective will do next. This thing is likely to be out in the morning papers with the boy's name mixed up in it, and it must be stopped right here. His name must be kept out of this at any price, and you can probably reach the New York press better than any one of us." "You are right," said Mr. Sutherland, rising hastily and preparing to leave. "Our client wants no notoriety of that sort, and I will make sure that nothing of the kind occurs. I have a friend who has unlimited influence with the newspaper men, and I will have him attend to the matter at once, and see to it that everything of that nature is suppressed." "That is best," said Harold Mainwaring gravely, coming forward. "I would have rendered the woman any necessary assistance. I am willing to do whatever is needful now, but living or dead, her name shall never be coupled with my father's name and mine." "You understand, of course, that money is no object in this matter," added Mr. Scott. "I understand perfectly, sir," said the attorney courteously. "Everything will be attended to. And, Mr. Barton, you will kindly confer with Mr. McCabe, and I will see you in the morning regarding your final decision. Good night, gentlemen." An hour later McCabe took his departure. Of his own theories or plans he had said little more than he was to leave the Waldorf that night for another part of the city, but all details for communication with him in case of necessity had been carefully arranged. "Your clerk has suddenly been called to London on important business," he said to Mr. Barton with a quiet smile, adding, "You may meet me occasionally, but it's not likely or best that you recognize me, and when I have anything to report you will hear from me." And with these words he was gone. When at last Harold Mainwaring and his foster father were again by themselves, the latter, noting the young man's abstraction, said, "This is naturally a great shock to you, my boy, but it is only what might be expected after such a life as hers. You have done nothing for which to censure yourself. You have done all that could be done under existing conditions, and more than was actually required of you, so you need have no regrets over the affair." "I understand that, sir, but the thought that I cannot banish from my mind is, knowing so well her treachery and deceit, is it possible that she herself had a hand in the murder, and finding at last that there was no hope of gaining my friendship, did she fear the developments which might follow from what she had told?" The elder man shook his head thoughtfully. "We cannot say, my boy. The thought occurred to me almost instantaneously, for, without doubt, she both hated and feared him, but time alone will tell." End of chapter 23.